assembled. First of all, thank you everyone here for taking part in this. I've been excited about this for a very long time. So we'll just start right at the beginning because I want to get everybody's reaction. We'll start off episode one and the intro sequence. I'm curious to what people thought about the new like updated look. We'll just go around the table and start with Michelle.
My heart, like when the first beats dropped, I was just like, oh my gosh. And then frame for frame, with like a few exceptions, I was I was a little like fourth grader again on Saturday morning, watching this epic show. Um, I mean, I can't really say anything else. I was just like, oh, like I remember the theater, like the crowd just erupted. It was insane.
All right, Dylan.
Uh, Same thing that Michelle just ended with. The three of us got lucky enough to see it in a theater. So, like, the first few beats, and then you couldn't hear anything else because everyone was just screaming so loud.
Yep.
Um, but I super love that we got the additions of Morph and Bishop to the credits. And this was something that I mentioned on a podcast of mine recently. Back in the 90s, Wolverine was the only one that like had his own solo comic. So for me, like his name behind him was the logo from comics. And so to see Bishop, they actually used the font from Bishop's mini series in the 90s so behind him. So that made me really happy that they used an actual logo for one of the few other characters who's had a solo book. So that was exciting for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really cool that we got to see all the logos actually. It's something that's like you read the comics and then you see on the screen and it just looks so cool. But I mean, I have to say the same for me. You know, in the theater, I remember the reactions and you know, not a lot of people say this, but even like the intro music of the Marvel animation into the intro of X-Men 97 was very good. Like it was a very smooth transition. And I don't know if that's like their intro music for the animation like all the time or if that's just for X-Men 97. But I think that seeing all of the episodes 1 through 3 in the theater with all these X-Men fans and reacting like that, it was really surreal. I think we all like kind of came together when the first note dropped for the intro. And also the fact that it's literally frame for frame with a few changes of the original. And even in the end credits, you know, we'll probably talk about it later, but end credits are the same thing. And it was just really, really cool to see.
Yeah, I agree 100%, and I loved the way they did the additions. We could talk about it later, but I think it was really neat for somebody who's only seen episode one and two, how there were minor changes in there rather than it be just being a static intro. And I feel like we got a massive hope, like a massive dose of foreshadowing, because in Morph's intro, it's very much alluded to Mr. Sinister, like alluding to that Mr. Sinister is still very much in his head. So you don't put that in there unless that's a major part of storyline coming up, which has me even more excited beyond, you know, the storyline that they already have. So then we go on to this scene where the Friends of Humanity have got Mr. Sunspot, who isn't going by Sunspot yet, kind of, you know, they captured him and they got all this Sentinel tech, and some of our beloved X-Men come in. Is it possible for Storm to be in a scene and not control the scene entirely? Because her entire like burst in was just like epic in and of itself.
No, it's not. And I know that Stefania, Michelle, and I will try not to mention it as much, but getting to see it in the theater, I'm so happy that we then a week later got to watch it on Disney Plus because I don't think I heard anything Storm said when we
Nope.
saw it at the premiere because anytime Storm was on the screen, there was so much cheering. And I'm like, I love this, but I don't know what she said.
We need subtitles for these like events because we know we're all gonna just scream. There's just moments like there's gasps, there's screams, there's I mean there could have been some tears as well. Like it was just very emotional.
Even in the intro, people were cheering for each character that came up in the intro. And so, like, you heard the music, but you also kind of didn't hear the music because everyone was just freaking out. And Storm, literally, I mean, she's an Omega level mutant for a reason. And we'll get back to that later, of course. But she is an Omega level, and she is a goddess for a reason. She walks into a room, she walks into a fight, or flies in. Not even, she walks in, she takes her time, and steals the show immediately. And we're like, okay, yes, steal the show, please.
Yeah, yeah. And then on top of it, I feel like this was then immediately followed by Cyclops showing up.
Yes.
And maybe it was just me, but I feel like, and I hate to say this and throw shade at anybody, but there were times where I felt like the original animated series and the movies never properly did Scott Summers justice.
No.
And yet, right off the bat, when he comes in, we kind of like get a view of, like, dare I say, a new and improved Cyclops, like, because he just rolled in like a badass. I mean, just
Yeah.
like all the confidence in the world. He had the swagger. He was very tactical in the way he was using his beams and moving around. We'll go the other way around the table. Steph, what did you think about it?
About Cyclops?
Yeah.
I thought it was finally time we got a perfect Cyclops representation. And it felt so good seeing him be this leader of this team. I know people were going back and forth with like Storm's leader, Cyclops leader, and all that. Cyclops never really got his fair chance at being the leader in TV. I mean, and more so in the animated series, we saw him be a leader than in the movies, of course. So to see the creators, the writers, everyone that worked on this show take their time with these characters and really give them the stories that they deserve really made me appreciate all the hard work that was put into it. It took like 3 years to get to this, and we finally made it. And I just cannot wait to see Cyclops in more episodes. He's become almost my favorite now, like of the series, just for how he's been portrayed. I never really cared for Cyclops, I guess you could say, and I think a lot more people will appreciate him after this show.
Dylan, what did you think?
Well, like you said, he came in like a badass. He came in like Batman, and it was like all the goons think they're gonna do something, and no, you get dropped in seconds. So it was cool, and then just to get to see Cyclops use his powers in other ways, like when he grabs Roberto and then blasts the ground so they can scoot back, like that Cyclops. He has this all planned out before he even walked in the room.
All right, Michelle, what you got?
Listen, I mean, Cyclops has never been my boy, okay? Like, but the way he was portrayed in 97, I was like, oh my goodness. Okay, I see why Jean likes him. Like, I get it. I get it now. You know, and all the memes I've been seeing on Instagram and socials, they're all true. Everything is true. Like, people put respect on this man. Like, the team did a great job with really, I think, showing us the best version of Cyclops.
Mm-hmm. And as we move along, we have this whole scene in the kitchen at the mansion where food is being prepared and Morph is being creepy. Gambit, to use Michelle's own words, was looking very snackish. Is that correct?
That was a whole ass snack, making snacks. It was a snack making snacks. And I was like, there was an audible gasp and then screams when he came on screen.
Yeah. It was really like
the crop top, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, who else would be wearing a crop top in that mansion? No one else would be. Only Gambit. And he works it. He really does. Yeah. And now I'm so happy that we can actually buy this shirt from Art of Lucas because I ordered mine already. And I cannot wait for it to come in.
Can't wait to see the cosplay photos of Logan wearing
Oh my God.
crop tops.
It just shows that like a lot more men need to wear crop tops.
I'm here for it.
Simple as that. Yeah,
I'm here for that.
me too.
Yes, yes.
Gambit's a
Please,
whole
guys, go
meal.
buy this tee. Art of Lucas has it up.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. Please bring on those Gambit crop top cosplays.
I say he's like a 5-course meal, easily.
Ah!
James, you need to change the subject, or she is going to mention every type of food
Well,
metaphor for game.
then, okay. So for everybody out there, and I appreciate it, for everybody out here who's, saying Gambit is a buffet and more, I'm going to counter that by saying, like, hello, we got sweaty Prego jean and workout clothes. So I'm happy with that, too. I crop top was out of my mind instantly. Like, hey, I mean, maybe it's the fact that I've been a Wolverine fan since I was a kid, but I've also had a crush on Jean Grey since I was a kid. So that was a whole nother look that I don't think I was emotionally or mentally prepared for once you walked in through the door. So yeah, we'll crop tops. Go to Art of Lucas and buy one and
They,
post them.
they wanted Gene fans like yourself to they went from floor to up. So yeah, they wanted
Yeah.
they wanted you to enjoy it, even with her being pregnant. So.
Yeah, if I wasn't hooked in before, I definitely was then. So we have this scene. One of the things that stuck out with me, and of course we're dealing with the original X-Men animated series, and now to this, and we have a bit of a change in rating. And so there are some things that they can do in X-Men '97 they couldn't do in the original animated series. And there were a couple times in these first 2 episodes where it was a little cutting, and a bit of the emotion. I mean, when they're having the discussion on the basketball court, and Logan says to Cyclops, the worst thing about Professor X being gone is you. I mean, that's like, if that doesn't emotionally take somebody down to their knees, I don't know what does.
Yeah,
There-
it was, you can hear the reactions when watching these these episodes, and you could tell like easily off the bat that this was not a show for like small kids. This wasn't the animated series anymore. And you could see that more in episode 2, which we'll talk about. But it's kind of refreshing to see these harsh topics be portrayed, especially for this new generation. This is what the X-Men are about. They had tough times, right? And we haven't really gotten exposed to that as much. And now, time and place, we are being exposed to it now. And I think this is the perfect time to be exposed to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dylan, what do you think?
I know that the Leewalds were recently on a podcast with you, and they recently gave an interview. I love that this series is rated more mature, because clearly there is a whole generation of people that did not get it when it was rated for children. So now that it's rated mature, it's going to be much more blunt and be like, you're an idiot. This is what they stand for. This is what they mean. Pay attention this time. So
I love how I kind of like ease into that, like not, and then you just go full out. Like, I love that.
Agreed. Michelle, what's your thoughts on it?
I mean, it's real. Like, it's real life. It's the whole metaphor for what we deal with today. And like back then, there was more, not censorship, but just like, okay, let's just scale this back a little bit. And now it's kind of like, you know what? We can't be super sensitive to things anymore. And the X-Men have always been an allegory for people who are, not,
others.
yes, yes, people who are other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that. I have a lot to say on that matter, and I know we all do. But I'm going to save that till we get to like a part in episode 2 because I think it's a really, really important discussion. As we sort of like go through this, what were personally when we got to this scene in the club where they're off and they're trying to get Sunspot and get him back, and they all kind of go there, and we get this really cool. I thought it was just like heartwarming, like Jubilee dance scene on the dance floor where she's sort of like using her powers to minimal effect and just kind of like having fun, as a teenager. Did that kind of like hit you guys the same way I did? We'll start with Michelle around the board.
I think it was a cute way to show like Jubilee's youthfulness, and then also a nice way to show like a bonding moment between her and Roberto, because he hasn't really opened up to anybody. He hasn't even used his powers in front of anyone. And so for Jubilee to just have this unguarded moment and just say, look, it's not all that bad, and to show him that having powers isn't such a bad thing and it can be fun. I liked it. It was very, very sweet.
How about you, Steph?
I just love the fact that she, she was once recruited to be on the X-Men, years ago, and now she has the opportunity to do that for somebody else, to say to them, it's okay that you're a mutant. You don't have to change who you are. You shouldn't have to be afraid to be who you are. And I love the fact that she's able to bond with somebody that came up the same way that she did. So that's something that they have in common. And I think we'll see that connection with them a lot more throughout the series, which I'm excited for. And, they're both young, they're both fun. And to see them both having fun in this world where they're still hated, it's refreshing to see. And so I can't wait to see more of their story and where it goes. I can't wait to see more of Sunspot, especially.
Dylan?
Yeah, all the same things. It's just nice to see that there's so many people that found the X-Men through the animated series. So Jubilee was like their avatar type of thing of getting to learn these characters. So I wish there was a little bit more Jubilee, if I had to say anything bad, just because she was so many people's character to see all these people for the first time. But it's nice to see the continuation and her being a mentor for someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like the way you put that. And to anybody who's here who watches this later, Dylan and Regina do a great recap podcast called "To Me, My X-Men," and you talked about that in that episode about how in the '92 animated series, like Jubilee was sort of like the viewer's avatar, like getting introduced to the X-Men world, and now in '97 we're getting to see that through Sunspot, and with the added addition of Jubilee being there, be like, oh, by the way, I've been there. I know what this is like. So it feels crazy, but trust me, it gets worse. Yeah. I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit because I think that this whole like Sentinel fight scene at the end of the first episode was just insane. I mean, it was absolutely epic. First of all, we have to talk about the whole the X-Jet gets attacked by the Sentinels and begins to break apart. They all have to ditch and get out. You've got Storm and Rogue and Morph as Archangel doing their thing to get everybody to the ground. And Scott's like, nah, I got this. And he's just going to like blast his way to the ground, which I feel like I need to find out who his trainer is, because if I sleep crooked one night, my neck hurts all day long. And this guy is just force blasting himself all the way to dirt. And how that doesn't leave a massive kink in your neck, I have absolutely no idea. But as we move along, because I want to have a bigger discussion, about this fight. Of course, we have I think what has now become iconic of they manage to fight some of them off. They find themselves surrounded. Scott says, "Show them the forecast," and we all know what happens after that. So as we sort of encompass this sort of fight scene, what did you guys think? Dylan, we'll start with you.
Well, everybody knows I am obsessed with Storm, but I do want to point out the fact that I love that at the beginning of the episode, the first X-Man you see is a woman. And then I also do love that in this fight scene, the first character that you see to do anything is Rogue, so another woman. And so I just super love that. I love that we got to see Rogue be the beginning of that brawl. But yeah, that storm scene, that transition, that music that was playing while she was walking in the desert, like everything was perfect. And then having Storm do some Shakespearean speech that literally nobody can hear because it seems like you're 5 miles away. Uh, just perfect. Love it. Amazing.
Steph, what'd you think?
Oh my, how can, what else can you think besides she's the most iconic X-Man woman to ever exist, goddess to ever exist? Like, she, I tweeted this when the video came out on Twitter, and I said, you know, she took her time. She's a true goddess. She took her time. She walked. She did not run for nobody. She was like, my powers are strong enough where I could be 5 miles away and I could still put a lot of damage on you. Like, she turned the sand into ice, first of all, walked on that. Oh my, she gave herself a runway. That's what she did. And I love that for her. I really do love that for her. And I remember watching it again when it came out, and I just had the biggest smile on my face. I just got so hyped up for, like, for what? For her. And I just loved seeing her be this, like, extreme powerhouse. I mean, I kind of have to say that the X-women are better than the X-men. Like, they're so much better. And like Storm's the symbol of that, really. I said it. I said
I
Michelle?
Oh, as soon as the Sentinel was like Omega level mutant detected, I knew this was going to be Storm's moment because she is such a baddie. Like, and then Allison's voice is just so iconic. I mean, from what I could hear from the screen, like without the screams, like she's perfect. Her voice is just, it's iconic. It hasn't changed. And Storm, Cyclops got his moment, his landing, his superhero landing, but Storm got her entrance.
And I do want to mention this was something I mentioned on my podcast, but I think it's so funny because it's what I thought in the theater, it's what I thought when I watched it again. But like, she took out so many of them. And I mentioned this on my podcast. It made me think of that part in Endgame where like everybody is losing, and then Scarlet Witch comes out of the building and then takes out a ton of them. And Okoye is like, why was she up there? Why was Storm back there?
it.
Why
Yeah.
wasn't she here with us?
She had to make her entrance. She had to make it. The timing had to be right.
Well, that's funny you say that because I thought about that, a little bit earlier, where, like I said, when they all had to ditch out of the jet, and Cyclops jumps, and I just thought of that scene from Captain America: Winter Soldier when Steve Rogers jumps out of the Quinjet, and the guy says, "Did he have a parachute?" No, no, he didn't. Like that, I immediately thought of that. And I agree with you guys. Everything about that was epic. Like you said, the second they said Omega level mutant, and the musical score in there was butter. I mean, it was just amazing. I could, like, that scene alone, I could sit and watch over and over and over again. Um, Now, back when the trailer first came out, we got to see this really cool scene of Gambit charging Wolverine's claws, which I don't know why. I've been an X-Men fan practically my whole life, been a huge Wolverine fan my whole life, and that never once occurred to me. And yet, when we saw it in the trailer, Steph did a hilarious TikTok for it, which just like made me die laughing. But finally, now when the episode comes out, we get to see that whole scene play out and what exactly was going on, where Gambit jumps on his back, and you can tell this is something that had been practiced, right? Because Gambit jumps on his back, charges his claws, jumps off, charges his bow staff, throws it to propel Wolverine. Wolverine tells Morph, I forget what he says, but it's time. He turns into Blob, trampolines off him, and decapitates Master Mold. Now, in the comics, we've all seen Colossus and Wolverine do the fastball special. This one I'm calling the dough ball special. And it was perfect. I loved it so much. What were you guys' thoughts on, like, how all that played out? We'll start with you, Michelle.
I think that Jake had mentioned that that was part of a pitch for the show. Like that was his creation. Like that was his big contribution. And they were like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's put it in the show." And I think it's fun to see other characters interacting and having their own like tag team moves. Kind of, it's like a video game moment, you know, if you've ever played like Marvel Ultimate Alliance or any of like the Capcom game, like Marvel versus Capcom, there's always like team up moves. And to see those in real life, like in the series, it was a treat. I loved it.
Steph, how about you?
Well, I know when I made that video, I didn't know who created that move at first, and then a whole bunch of people that were working on X-Men 97 commented and tagged Jake, and I was like, I have to meet this guy. I have to like meet him and shake his hand. I actually did end up shaking his hand at the premiere. It was funny because um I literally was with my friends and I walked by him in the hotel, the after party, and and he goes, I know you. I'm like, I I didn't like recognize his face at first. And then I was like, what? And he's like, you wanted to shake my hand. And I was like, oh, I know exactly who you are. I was like, oh my God, can I please shake your hand? Can I give you a hug? But it's just, it's really cool to see that whole team up finally all together. And it's definitely something that like they practiced beforehand in the danger room. I can only imagine the amounts of team ups they've done in the danger room, and I can't wait to see more. But I'm so happy that this made it into the show. I think it's something different outside the fastball special, which we see all the time, and I cannot wait to see again, by the way. I hope we do see it. And I think I think that it's really cool because Gambit and Wolverine had this like past, you know, they didn't really trust each other, whatever, they always bickered. And it's really cool to see them team up. Like in a fight, you know, they're a team, but outside they're like, nah, you're annoying. So it's really cool to see all of it put together. And the fact that Morph has a role in it as well is really cool because Morph turned into Blob. And then what other like thing like I can't imagine like anything else that they could have put in there besides that. It's just it was really cool to see.
Dylan, what'd you think?
I super loved it. When it comes to like me being one of those crazy people that's so obsessed with the comics, but I also love the animated series. I have to think of them as two different worlds. So when it comes to the animated series, it's fun to see these things like when the Blackbird did blow up and like Storm and Rogue were like, we got this, we got to save everybody. So then there's like this moment with Gambit and Wolverine, and it's just like you grew up on these people. So you're like, yay, I'm seeing family do stuff together. And so it's different because Gambit and Wolverine probably wouldn't do something like that in comics, but the Gambit and Wolverine that are in the cartoon are different and they are closer. So it's fun to see this different world. And it is nice to see Morph be a part of it because Morph didn't really do anything else during that fight. We got to see everyone else do something, but Morph did not. And a person that I had on my podcast actually pointed this out to me that they were like, Morph died because of a sentinel. So maybe he was hiding. And I kind of now wish they maybe would have showed something like that. Like, I mean, that would have to be PTSD. You died because of a sentinel, and now you're surrounded by like 8 of them. So that would have been fun to see. But yeah, I as much as I love the Storm moment, I super love the Wolverine and Gambit moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Morph was sort of like I kind of envisioned him sort of hiding behind a pile of rubble, kind of like in a WWE kind of moment, like waiting for the perfect time to come out with the folding chair and nail somebody from behind. And you know, as soon as Logan was like, "Hey, belly up," he's like, "Okay, I can do that." That's what you're going to ask me in this fight. Now that they're all dead, but the big one, and clearly you got this. Um, you know, after that, I always have to say we jumped to this scene where the X-Men are getting ready to play basketball again. And I found it personally so poetic that Jean was dressed as the referee because she spent so many years refereeing between Scott and Logan that it just like made perfect sense for her to be that. And so then of course we get the whole like, hey guys, you know, I know I've been a stick in the mud. I love it when Scott admits his own faults. And then of course we get the alert that somebody is in Xavier's office, and they run in, and there is Magneto. And that was the scene that we got to see in the trailer. Like we kind of knew that was coming. Like, by the way, everything is mine now. And then we get like boom, end credits, and that is the end of episode 1.
Don't miss out on talking about the part where Gambit takes his shirt off.
Oh,
Yeah, I kind of. Yeah.
His other
There's so much.
superpower,
His
right?
other superpower.
Yeah.
Which is actually, it's funny because he actually has like a tiny superpower that is like, he's got Riz. That's literally one of his like unknown tiny superpowers that isn't that powerful, but it's like a power. I remember learning about that and I was like, that is such a Gambit thing that they would give him. And I
It makes
actually
sense.
want to see that like be a joke somewhere in the future.
I'm just gonna say, beginning to end, there were a lot of midriff topless men in this episode. It was rife. I even caught it when I went back and watched it again. But it's like after the big fight with the Sentinels, and and Cooper's there, and she's like, "Hey, once again, the X-Men." It shows a panning shot of like the X-Men kind of, and there's Wolverine with his uniform shirt ripped off, and I'm like, man, like,
You
I
would
don't know.
I'm not
never,
mad about it.
Yeah.
I'm not mad about it.
you would never
What?
know that a gay man wrote this.
Right?
You would never know that.
Yeah, I don't know. Like the Friends of Humanity don't stand a chance, Sentinels don't stand a chance, and shirts don't stand a chance in this show at all. Like,
Even in the intro with Wolverine, he's like only has his like underwear on, and then he like snaps on his
Yeah.
costume that comes on. Like I saw that for a split second. I was like, wait, was he naked? Because it's never happened before.
and it was slightly longer shirtless than in the original series, where he's Jungle Logan and then jumps and turns into Wolverine. It was just a eye candy second longer, I think, for the crowd out there. So we close out that one. We close out the first episode. We get into the second one, and right off the bat, we're getting to see this whole Ferris wheel scene, right, with Magneto coming in and being the savior. I realize that we're probably jumping ahead a little bit here, but this is more of like a bigger question. Do we think that Magneto is good for good, or do we think that we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop? I'm gonna start with you on this one, Dylan.
Ooh. Why you gotta start with me? I mean, it's Magneto, and both of those possibilities and even more possibilities are possible. So it just depends on what suits him at that moment. But right now, he is dealing with the fact that his boyfriend died, and his boyfriend left all his orphans to him, and so now he has to take care of all of them.
I hadn't heard it phrased that way, but yeah, I'm on board with the theory for sure. Steph, what do you think?
I think, deep down in Magneto's heart, he really loves Xavier like a brother, right? Or like a partner, like Dylan reference. And I think he feels like he would just disappoint Xavier more if he kind of went back to his old ways, but it's also Magneto, so like you can't tell with him. It's one of those where it's like he could jump back so quick and like nothing ever happened before, right? But I think I would love to see more of this caring side of Magneto, especially with, Magneto caring for Rogue, and we'll talk about that because that's interesting. So he has this side of him that's like heartfelt, and he cares about people. He cares about other mutants, I guess, to an extent, right? And I would just love to see him continue that. But I mean, I have to agree with Dylan. It's Magneto. You never know what's gonna happen. He can switch sides so quickly depending on the situation. He kind of like adapts to situations. Like he'll choose a side if he needs to. I feel like he gives off that vibe a lot. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Michelle, what do you say?
I think Magneto's always gonna do Magneto first. And as much as he cares about Charles, he doesn't necessarily care for his dream, but he's like, well, these mutants fell into my lap, so maybe I can use this as, something that could push some of my own agenda items forward because I think his tendencies are still there. I'm not saying he's not irredeemable because like referring back to comics like Age of Apocalypse, that whole storyline was about Magneto taking over the X-Men because Xavier died at a younger age. So I do believe there's some kind of compassion. Magneto does care about mutants. Like that is not a question. It's just how little he cares for humanity. that is that is where the questioning comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
So he's willing to play nice for now because he kind of needs to clear his name a little bit. He's like, listen, humanity, I messed up. However, y'all are also fucking up. Okay, so I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna be the bigger man this time, but next time, don't come for me. So he's like, don't test me.
Yeah, I sort of feel like the analogy that I sort of have bumping around in my head is that let's say you are not particularly fond of cats whatsoever, and your best friend is going on vacation for 3 months, and for 3 months wants you to watch the cats. And you're doing it because you love your friend and you want them to be happy, but you also wouldn't cry if the house burned down while you were gone because then it's no longer your problem, right? Like, there's,
Pretty much.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That's a pretty good analogy.
So we'll see.
I want to mention one more thing about Magneto before we move on.
Yeah.
Just that the second episode opening credits has Magneto a part of it, and that he's the first one because he's the leader now. Amazing. That's all.
Do we know, is the M on his chest for Magneto? Is it for mutant, or is he just letting us know what he's identifying as?
It should be a D for daddy. Like,
oh my goodness. I mean, he's a silver
None of us
fox.
have an answer, but Michelle's like, the answer is...
The answer. I mean, he's a silver fox. You can't... Did you see him, like, when he leaned against that desk, though? Like, you see it all over Twitter now, and I'm like, I mean...
Rogue knows what's up, okay?
Rogue knows what's up. She's like, one, I can touch this man, and two, he's got something going on. I think I can go along with it.
Yeah.
If you are Eric and you have spent that much time doing crunches, you deserve to stand at a desk like that. Like you've earned it at that point, right?
Yeah. The M is for magnificent. Okay.
I was gonna say malicious, but okay, yeah, we can go with
marvelous.
Marvelous. The marvelous mutant Magneto. That sounds like that's a whole catchphrase in and of itself. So yeah, speaking of which, we do have that. Steph said we did have that Eric Rogue scene there, which they, for the first time in the animated series, even the original, they sort of alluded to a past. And most people, like all of us who have read the comics, and for those of you who haven't read the comics, this is not outside of canon. There is definitely a history there, especially for those of you who are familiar with the Age of Apocalypse and that they actually had a child in that timeline, which I thought was like one of my favorite timelines. But yeah, what do we, and of course, writing-wise, this creates all kinds of fun stuff. Should Magneto go the other way? You know, should he be fine with the house burning down and now he's back to being, you know, big enemy number one? I don't know. What'd you think about that, Michelle?
I mean, going back to your analogy, I feel like he would like to save a few things from the
One
fire.
cat in
One of
particular.
those, one cat in particular would be Rogue for sure. I I like that they brought their relationship into it. Um, I'm kind of a fan, like because she can't touch people, and she's always said that. Like she brought it up even at the club, she was really sad. She couldn't touch anyone. And then to be able to touch Magneto, like that's like human connection that everybody craves. So if they did have their thing, like we don't know the full extent of how it happened, when it happened, like was this before Gambit, after or during Gambit? Like we don't know all the details. But from what the comics have given us, like we know that there was a special time that they were together, like both in canon and in Age of Apocalypse. So it's not surprising that these two, find each other. I do feel bad for Gambit though. Like you can tell like he recognizes something, like he knows something is going on, and other people are kind of like not throwing it in his face, but they're like, "Oh yeah, like they're spending a lot of time together," and he's just like not happy about it.
Hmm. Steph, what are your thoughts?
I saw this comment and Rogue and Magneto is eye candy though. I'm like, not gonna lie, they are pretty eye candy. Um, but I remember when I first read in the comics their relationship, they had like a thing. I was like, whoa, like this is Magneto, and Magneto is like really old, and Rogue is like supposed to be early to mid 20s, whatever. And I was like, whoa. But I've grown to appreciate it over the years, and I after watching this episode, I was like, okay, I'm kind of into it now. I like where they're going with this. And of course, I also do love the Age of Apocalypse storyline from the comics, and love their relationship in that as well. And they have this connection that Rogue craves. She can touch him. She can't touch anyone else. She can't touch Gambit, unfortunately. And it's nice to see her feel happy that she can actually do this with somebody. That's something she was craving for a long time. And now that she has someone to do it with, touch, she's gonna try her best to keep it a thing, keep it an ongoing thing as long as she can. But I do feel bad for Gambit. Poor Gambit. I love him so much. And the fact that there's already a meme of the three of them, the triangle, love triangle. I don't know if y'all saw it. Welcome home, cheater. I cannot wait for more memes to come out from the show. But that right there was the funniest thing I've ever seen, because me being a comic nerd and also like watching X-Men 97, I'm like, this is so real. This is so true. But it's also like Rogue and Gambit have this on-off relationship. So people were saying like, oh, she cheated on Gambit, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But technically they aren't together. They always had this on-off relationship, but they never could really get together. So we don't know what happened from the last show to now between them two. But from watching this one, they ain't together. So technically all rules are gone. There's no rules, right? So Ro can do whatever he wants. So if she wants a silver fox, she can get a silver fox. She can get Magneto. He down bad for her. She down bad for him. I mean, it's a love that I'm excited to see. And this love triangle. Ooh, I love love triangles.
But before I get to Dylan, I have to ask. When you say Magneto is really old, I'm curious as to what age range you're placing him in here. I'm just for a friend. I want to know. You like 37? Okay. Like
so, like Magneto's supposed to be like, I don't know, math here. Like, isn't he supposed to be like in his 60s or like 70s or something?
I don't.
60s, right?
Well, here's the issue that I have is that so in 1963, when this comic begins, the notion is that the original X-Men are teenagers, and Xavier and Magneto are like in their early 30s.
Hmm.
The problem that we have is that it's been around for so long, and I don't want to throw shade at Ian McClellan or Patrick Stewart, but that was one of the issues I had with the casting. Is all of a sudden it makes it seem like, but you have to if Eric was a Holocaust survivor, right?
Hmm.
He has to be like that old, which now by the time we're to 2024 is getting like ancient old. Like it's no longer like when it first came out in the 60s. Okay, you were just 20 years removed from the Holocaust. It wasn't that, but now, yeah, we're in that sort of time thing. So he's just Gray Fox, but you still, I don't think you've answered my question yet as to what old is, like
What's old in
super
your
old.
book?
I want to know.
Okay. Okay, so let me put it into this. The age gap really threw me off between them because it was a very large age gap between them, and I can't really like pinpoint how old Rogue is supposed to be, but I know she's supposed to be like in her early to mid 20s, maybe more like mid 20s at this time. Um, so seeing that age gap between the two of them really threw me off when I was first reading the comics. But I'm, if you're trying to get me to say that you're old, you're not old.
Oh, I'm old. That's okay. That's okay. I've got the gray. That's all right. Um,
Right. But also, listen, I think maybe since Magneto's powers have to do with like magnetism, maybe he can control like elements in his body to make him like not age as much. I
Yeah.
don't know. Like,
There's a
because
lot of iron
he can,
inside of us.
yeah, he can do a lot with that, as we saw from the movie. So maybe, like, maybe it slows down the age process. I'm just gonna put that out there.
that's
That
fair.
is probably true. That makes
Yeah,
sense, actually.
yeah.
All right. Well, finally, Dylan, what do you think of the Rogue Magneto thing?
I'll go like rapid fire. I love having a new triangle. I'm tired of Jean, Scott, and Logan. So yes, give me more of anyone else. And, and I love when the animated series, because again, it's its own world. I love when it has to take its own liberties to try to bring some comic history into it. So we didn't expect to see this. Well, you wouldn't have thought that they were going to try to mention that Rogue and Magneto had a thing, and now they already had a thing. And so we're like, wait, what? Okay, that already happened. Kind of like in the first episode, and at the end of the animated series, we found out that there actually was an original five. Wait, when did that happen? You never talked about that, but you're going to have a picture of the original five. Okay, well, okay, it just happened, and we're not going to talk about it. So
Mm,
I like having them try to put some comic history into it. So then the hardcore comic nerds are like, oh, okay, yay. But yes, my main thoughts are I'm happy to have a new triangle.
mm,
I also love the fact that the X-Men, especially in the Claremont run, it's written like a soap opera. They are a soap opera story. That's what it is. And so you're always going to have this type of drama in every story you read. You have love triangles, you have jealousy, you have people betraying others, you have so many things. You have new people coming in at the end of a comic or at the end of a show episode, like we're going to talk about. And you're like, who is this person? So that is why the X-Men are so juicy to read and to watch because people love drama. That's just a major humanity kind of thing. People love drama, love reading about gossip and all that. I mean, not everyone, but like majority of people, I can say. So that's why they're so popular. Their
mm.
stories are so popular, and that's why Claremont created like the best X-Men comic runs that we ever had, you know? So I think he talked about it at one of the panels I went to, at one con I went to, but he was explaining to it like, yeah, like X-Men are a soap opera. That's how we wrote them. That's how they will that's how they were always interpreted as, and it just makes for good um, content. He said like I think he said that um, they that's where they were like selling well because the drama that was in each storyline. You had to pick up the next comic to read what was going to happen next.
Hmm. I agree, 100%. The one of the things that I definitely want to get to here, because we have this entire like fantastic trial of Magneto scene, which I mean I feel like we could do almost an entire live talking about Magneto's speech in and of itself, because I always think that the best. I realize right now we're supposed to be saying Magneto. We're trying to decide if he's on our side or not. But I firmly believe the best villains do not, in any way, shape, or form, believe that they are villains themselves. And I think Claremont, especially as you said, and so many other writers did such a great job throughout X-Men history of justifying Magneto's, if not his actions, definitely his beliefs and why it is that he feels the way he does. And so that speech that he gives before the UN is absolutely amazing. And I really don't mean to skip over that, but I definitely want to get to the scene where the Friends of Humanity and the protesters attack, because for those of you who are complaining that the X-Men are woke, if this doesn't have straight up MAGA January 6th vibes, I don't know what does. And it was such a powerful and fantastic scene, not just in terms of it trying to make a point, but also in terms of like showing what mutants deal with. And that even when you have someone like Magneto, understandably humans are angry, but he's trying to go through the due process. And even still, this kind of stuff is happening. So I'm curious to see as to what you guys thought about that entire encapsulated scene. Dylan, we'll start with you, man.
Okay. Like you said, Magneto is trying to do the due process, and that isn't enough for people's hatred. So that was just a very powerful moment, because to compare it to other things that happened in real life, there was a due process, there was an election. I try not to compare it too much, even though I really want to. There was an election. It was fair. Somebody won. That's what was supposed to happen, but people's hatred overtook them over, and their hatred is more important to them than not. And so to see it on X-Men 97, I hope people are actually paying attention this time, that this is what is happening in real life. And I really loved seeing that, even though I love the X-Men for being superheroes and explosions and whatnot. I also really love them for something like this. And yeah, that's my thoughts.
All right. Michelle, what do you think?
I thought it was a very powerful scene because these are, so he's on trial, and even the people who are supposed to not be passing judgment on him, they very much are. So things are really weighed against him. Like he's very much fighting an uphill battle at this point. And then to have things escalate to where it's like an all-out battle just because hatred just like takes over, it gets crazy, it gets messy, it gets to the point where somebody who is there to protect their own like gets injured. And that particular, well, it's the storm moment, which after that happens, it's very devastating. Like I almost cried in the theater just because of the way that she reacted to what happened to her. And then Magneto, you can see he's enraged. So his hatred is kind of on the same level as these people. And they're realizing, like, oh, like we fucked up. Like they thought that they were going to win, that their hatred was just so powerful enough. But in reality, like Magneto is holding a lot back. And he even said that with his words, with his emotions, like sitting there being, chained. And then he just snaps. He escalates it to where, he's got these people in power and he's telling them, he's like, listen, like what you did here was wrong. and I could end you like right now. And then, however, I'm going to show you that I have learned from my mistakes. I'm going to show you compassion, even though you don't deserve it. And that whole scene was just so powerful. And I hope that people like see that and they realize that hate's not the answer. Like you can't fight violence with violence. And you can see that Magneto finally kind of realized that in himself. He's like, this is what Charles was trying to say. So I think that scene in particular was very, very well done.
Steph?
I think you guys both like said it perfectly. I think one of the most powerful things that he said in his speech, especially when he had all of them up close to space, he says, "Don't make me let you down." And that can mean two things: let you down emotionally and let you down physically, because he could easily, drop them from where they are, like almost in space. And it was really, you know, this word was thrown around in the last like 5 minutes, powerful. So that's all you can really like say about Magneto's speech and this scene, this moment. It was just powerful. And it was refreshing to see this done in real time, in today's time, because, this is definitely a reference to something that has happened in history. That is one of the worst and craziest things that's happened in history. And it's it's refreshing to see it in this new light, in this new generation. And I think Magneto in this moment had become one of the most favorite characters in this show. I think at that moment during his speech, showing his care for Storm, because he does care about mutants, right? And doesn't want to see them hurt. Like Storm got stripped of her powers, and just the emotion that she was releasing. She says, "I can't feel the wind." Like that line right there was just devastating, because that was her whole thing. That was her whole world, right? And I think Magneto's become a fan favorite character now from that. And I hope that we get to see a lot more of this side of him in the future. And I would love to see some more characters step up to the plate and kind of emit that like powerfulness. Like I feel like you're going to see a lot of references to our world. You're going to see a lot of that in this show, and that is exactly what the X-Men were. From the 60s to now, they referenced a whole lot of real world problems. And it's something that we didn't get to see a lot with like the Avengers. I don't want to compare them, but I will say I favor the X-Men over the Avengers. I just think they're like cooler and better. But not saying I don't like the Avengers. I just think that we didn't get to see a lot of that with the Avengers, especially in the movies. So seeing this now, especially done by Marvel Studios, by the same company, but Marvel Animation, it's a refreshing light to see. And I can't wait to see a lot more of this. I think Magneto kind of proved himself in that moment, and he needed that for himself, which I'm happy to see.
I agree. I think that everybody nailed it. Like that. I think it's a testament to the show, like just how emotion invoking it is. Because you're absolutely right. That scene where Storm is laying on the ground, you see her like reaching to the sky, and she's like, "I can't feel it." It is such a heart wrenching scene. But when you add to that, not only were we watching it, but Magneto saw that. And if there was ever a time, I think, at least in the short span that we've seen him trying to, fulfill Xavier's dream, that he could have snapped, it could have been there. Like he could have just gone full Waco on that whole building and just annihilated it. So to go back to the earlier analogy, he actually saw the house catch on fire and he went and saved the cats when he didn't have to. You know what I mean? He could have just said, you know what, Chuck, I gave it my best, but these people are assholes. I'm done. And yeah, I think that was a major turning point. And we saw that then immediately after when it cuts to the scene of Magneto and Cyclops back at the mansion, and Cyclops hands Magneto a cup of coffee. And Magneto says poison, and Cyclops kind of smiles and says dark roast. Like you could see that he had kind of begun to win Scott over, and I thought that was all powerful in and of itself. And then of course I don't want to like skip over too much here, but then we have to get to kind of the bombshell ending of season 2 where Jean shows up. And we're like, for those of us who's read the comics, we're like, oh my God, pregnant Jean's been Madeline Pryor the whole time, right? Right? That's what we're going with, right? Yeah. And of course, I am terrible because I skipped ahead of one of my favorite scenes, and it's the whole scene where Jean goes into labor. And of course,
I was waiting for that.
The one mutant who is home alone with Jean when this happens has to be Logan, who, when he thinks it might be Apocalypse, is ready to fucking go. He's like, and then the second she's like, no, the baby. I have never seen Logan, James Howlett, Wolverine so mortified in his entire existence. Whether it be a comic, whether it be a show, whether it be a movie, that man soiled himself when she said the baby. And then we have to talk about the fantastic scene framing where she uses her telekinetic ability to his coat and car keys, which he catches. Right? That was such a great scene. We'll start with Michelle on that one.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it was hilarious because we know like Logan cares about Jean so much, and for him to be the one in charge of getting her to the hospital, like that is hilarious. Like he was completely blinded. He's like, I'm gonna run over kids, I'm gonna run over dogs, I'm gonna ignore like all traffic signals. And poor Jean in labor is like, oh my God, like let me save all of y'all. Like, can you please slow down? While she's making like a psychic like telephone call to Scott, being like, bro, please get over here because Wolverine, like I don't know if I'm gonna get to the hospital.
Dylan, what do you got to say on that one? I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I was like, it's just cute. It's just cute.
Yeah. It was a lot of cuteness, and then especially just the part where Jean has like a contraction, and so then we get a call back to the original series because she takes the roof off of the car, just like Wolverine took the roof off of Cyclops' car or Jeep, I can't remember. Or it was a car that he made a Jeep because he took the roof off. But yeah, it was a cute scene. It was nice to have that kind of counterbalance of the episode because there was the whole very serious insurrection part of the episode, and then it was like, and now we're gonna have like a 90s comedy sitcom where this woman and this man who love each other but can't, and she's pregnant with his enemy's baby. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's the soap opera part. That's literally the soap opera part. But yeah, that was really funny. Again, memes. There was not a meme, but the screen grab that came out from that episode, that part, and it's just going all over Twitter and social media. Just seeing it and people's reactions to it is so funny. Like I'm seeing all these new, or not new X-Men fans. We are getting new X-Men fans though, but people that are fans of the X-Men or were fans that really didn't like show it as much, and now we're seeing more of them and their reactions to these hilarious parts of these shows is just, and the memes that are coming out is so funny. Like, out of all the people, of course it's Logan that gets stuck with Jean and her water breaking, right? Like, only would happen to him. And I can't wait to talk about the next part because I was like, what in the world?
Yeah.
The next part's pretty funny too. Pretty good.
I watching that scene and what Jean and her anguish on that ride to the hospital does to Logan's Jeep. Um, I, of course, made the joke as I'm watching with my wife that, oh, wow, see, Jean finally went topless with Logan. And she didn't think the joke was near as funny as I thought it was. And she's probably groaning that I'm even repeating it now because she's like, that's not a good one, Finch. That's not it. And I'm like, I thought it was hysterical, you know?
I'm
So,
laughing at you. I don't know if I'm laughing
yeah,
with you. I'm
cringe,
laughing
total
at you.
cringe. I lean into it at this point. It's fine. But yes, so we get to. I didn't want to skip over the hospital. Like we get to the hospital. Um, the doctor. Yeah, my wife shake my head. Yeah, she knows. That's my wife, Kura, by the way. Um, so we get to the hospital scene. Doctors refusing to treat Jean and all of her anguish, and Scott's like, "We're calling an audible. Rogue, do your thing." Uh, what you guys think of that? We'll hop on with you here, Dylan.
The funniness was continuing, but then it was also like, here's also a little bit of seriousness because there's the real world things where sometimes hospitals would not treat people because of the color of their skin or because they are visibly queer. So that was a little Debbie Downer part of the fun part that was happening, but also another thing of Cyclops being an amazing leader and also Rogue, who typically wouldn't necessarily do that, but her leader is asking her to do it. Her friends are asking her to do this because they need it, and she just does it without hesitation. Um, when other times she would be like, "Oh God, don't stand next to me. I might touch you." So it was fun, sad, and great all at one spot.
Mm-hmm. Steph, what do you think?
Well, I mean, just in one touch, Rogue became a scholar with a PhD, and love that for her. Um, but I also was like, what in the world? Like, they just asked her to deliver their baby, and like, but like, it's for a good reason, right? Because he refused to, the doctor refused to deliver their child, and like Dylan said, you're back to the real world problems where it's like these, you have like the really funny moments, and then real quick it goes back to real world problems because that's how fast it is for them, right? They have their fun moments, but it could turn real quick, and they don't know when it's going to happen. So to see them get rejected, Jean get rejected, uh, to have her baby there, um, it's got me thinking like, okay, maybe Cyclops in his head is thinking, all right, now I gotta like make Beast build like an infirmary in the X Mansion, or like do all this stuff because these people won't treat us, so we have to have like a backup, which is, it sucks, but you can't help but think that, especially Cyclops, who is the father of this child, right, and cares for Jean a lot. Um, but again, I mean, it's a serious moment. I thought it was pretty funny that Rogue had to deliver a baby, but then she's like, "Oh, what if I touch this baby and I absorb uh, them and kill them?" And but Jean and Scott have so much trust in Rogue that they know that she won't do that. They know her, they trust her a lot, and they know that their baby is going to be safe in her hands. So that's really nice to see from them as well.
Mm-hmm. Michelle?
Well, I'm really glad that like Cyclops shows up because the Wolverine's a hot mess and like cannot, he's like absolutely no help at this point. He was just the driver. He was the baby driver. And
No, he wasn't
and
there.
and like Scott immediately comes in and he's like, "What's the situation? All right, you're not gonna help us out. Get the fuck out. Rogue, you got this, girl." And so we get a smooth delivery, and I love it. Like it's great.
Mm-hmm.
No notes. No notes. Y'all already talked about it.
Right.
I do just want to point out, I know I glanced over it and then Stefania kind of glanced over it too. But it sometimes it is something that people don't think about when it comes to like being someone of color or being a queer person. Like I'm happy they put this in there because it's a whole bunch of white characters, so you wouldn't necessarily think that. But for people who are not white or people who are gay, that is something that we constantly have to think about. Or maybe when we let our guard down, then we're like, oh, well, I can't go to that bar because that's a straight bar. And then like straight friends might be like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. So I'm just happy that they put something like that in there because there's people that don't think of that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah, it was very poignant. It was very and a commenter said this earlier. I'm sorry I missed it, but how well, like with that scene and how the show kind of like had this really flawless way of pivoting in and out of the funny to the poignant, and without it feeling like whiplash. That they both hate, and I think it's excellently well paced that way. So back to what I was saying 15 minutes ago, because I was an idiot and glanced over a huge chunk of the episode. We're at the scene where Gene's there all of a sudden, right? So now we're in this like, those of us are wondering, is there like the Madeline Pryor storyline about to happen here? What thoughts do we have on that? We'll go with you first, Steph.
I mean, I can't really say much. I mean, we saw the first 3 episodes, so we know what's gonna happen. But all I can really say is just wait till next week. Wait till episode 3. It's I'm gonna say that soap opera thing again. It's like a cliffhanger, and I actually think I forgot who said this. Someone said that that worked on the show that every episode has a cliffhanger. I don't remember who. So yeah, I'm not gonna say anything.
Is there anything above that to add, Dylan?
Yeah, we all got to see the first 3, but I can at least tell you in the 20 seconds that I had in between episode 2 and episode 3, I was like, what is happening? Because like I said earlier, that animated series in 97, they take liberties of stuff that's happened in comics. They tell stories not necessarily how they happened. So yeah, in my head, I'm like, so wait, yeah, in comics, Maddie's the one that was pregnant and had a baby, but maybe they're doing it different. So like, maybe that's Maddie at the door. Maybe that is Jean. So yeah, you can never know what's going to happen because it is a little bit different than the comics. And I mean, it ended with everybody else like shocked, and the Jean who just gave birth, who's standing behind Cyclops, she doesn't look shocked. She looks pissed. Like, why is she here? Type of look. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Also, there was like a gasp in the theater when Morph opened the door. So that should tell you a lot, about the reactions people had and their thoughts. Because like I myself, I was also confused. I was like, what is going on? This isn't right.
Mm-hmm. Before I go to you, Michelle, I do want to say that, yeah, that was one thing that Kura, my wife, just brought up, is how when she opened the door, she says, I need the X-Men. She doesn't say, Scott, help me, Logan, help me, Hank, help me. She says, I need the X-Men. You guys probably have more to say on that because you've already seen the 3rd episode, but for those of us who haven't, it's like, what did that mean? Okay, Michelle, I'm sorry.
I just didn't expect the show to get there that quickly. Like the pacing of the show, like all these storylines that we're getting in this finite amount of time, they're all done very well, very well. And this moment is set up for the next installment, which not going to spoil it, but it was also, I was very impressed and surprised with the way that things happen in the 3rd episode. Y'all are gonna like it. There's a lot of Easter eggs. I don't want to say too much.
To help Michelle so she won't spoil anything. Yeah, like the episode we just ended with was the trial of Magneto. There was a lot that led up to that. For that issue, and then I think there was at least a second issue where it continued. So like you did an entire trial of Magneto in one episode, and then Storm lost her powers. And if you're somebody who pays attention to all the episode titles that we got released a month ago, you know that there's a life death two-part episode coming. So you're like, oh God, you just did Trial of Magneto. You started Life Death. Like there is so much happening, and now you're ending this episode with a second Jean. What? How are you there so quickly? And it's only episode 2.
And there's only 10 episodes in this season, so it's like, how are they going to get all of this in just 10 episodes? You know, fun fact, I actually found the Life Death comic at Midtown Comics when I was in New York. I found it when I was looking through it. I was like, yes! So I grabbed it.
Fun.
Fantastic. Yeah, I feel like at the rate they're moving, by episode 9, we're going to be to Krakoa. And we'll just, and then after that,
I mean, there's a lot to cover. There's a lot to cover.
There is true. There is true. By the middle of season 2, they're going to be calling Gail Simone for ideas. But yeah, there we go. So we got them. If everybody's good, we do have a couple viewer questions here to shoot through before we get out of here. Heat Industries wants to know if you guys could each have any superpower, what would they be and why? By the way, Stefania is so cool. Okay. Well, since you're the coolest, we'll start with you, Steph. If you could have any power, what will it be?
When I was a kid, I've always wanted to fly. So, because I always wanted to travel, and I do want to travel more. So I would say I would love to fly.
Dylan?
Weirdly enough, I feel like not very many people think this, or maybe not very many gay fans think this, but I would want super strength just because I think when it comes to fights, when it comes to stories, the person with super strength is very important and is there for their team or their family, and I consider myself someone who is always there for my team or my family.
I feel like I already have a superpower. I have luck powers that are like really unexplainable, and I like it. So I like my mutant gift.
It's not a real superpower. It's not a real superpower. Definitely not cinematic.
I don't know. I don't know.
You know, when I was a young man growing up, and for many decades, I thought that Magneto's powers would be the ultimate power, because with that you can fly, you can create force fields. The amount of money you can make hands over fist in the construction and demolition field alone would be worth it. As I've gotten older, I'm going to say, as cliche as it may be, I think I'd almost want to go with healing factor, because then my knees and back won't hurt after a con. Or people on live streams won't call me old as often. And that would be pretty neat in and of itself. I'm gonna let that one go. Gilbert, the Omega level threat. That's awesome. Yeah. Everyone hates Ty. Follow me back, please. I'll think about it. Alexander says, "What was everyone's favorite part of the new season?" Steph, you get to go.
There's a lot of good parts. I might have to say, on a storytelling level, my favorite part was the trial of Magneto, that scene. I think that, because we saw lots of different emotions. And we felt a lot of different emotions watching it. So I have to say that would probably be my favorite part of the shows.
Dylan?
My favorite part is a part that we skipped over, and that would be the X-Men fighting the Friends of Humanity and Executioner, and Morph showing up and giving us so many cameos with Lady Deathstrike and Colossus, and then going and holding their own as Psylocke against Executioner. That was so much fun.
Mm-hmm. Michelle?
Besides Gambit's crop top, I would have to say, I can't fully say because it's episode 3. So I think if y'all saw episode 3, like, it's my favorite so far.
Okay. All right. We got one last one here. My wife, Kara, wants to know, how much do you guys think Magneto is being true to Charles's dream, and how much do you think there's some premeditated manipulation going on? We'll start with you on that one, Michelle.
I feel like I touched on it a little bit before in our Magneto discussion. Like Magneto is really only about Magneto deep down. Like he can waffle a little bit, but I think there is an agenda. I I think he saw an opportunity and he's like, okay, well, I'm gonna just see where this goes. And if it works out in his benefit, cool. If not, well, I can always go back to the Brotherhood.
Mm-hmm. Dylan?
Uh, yeah, same thing that Michelle said earlier just now. Magneto's gonna do Magneto. Um, like he said that he was sending the Morlocks to Genosha, and he's like, I don't understand why the X-Men never invited them, or what if the X-Men did. The X-Men did invite them to the mansion. Storm invited them. They didn't want to leave. So it's not. He's doing what he wants to do. Doing what will make him look like he's doing Charles's dream better, but he's still doing his dream, just in Charles's name.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have to, there's really not much else I could say. Y'all really said everything. But I will say that the majority of the X-Men will still tiptoe around Magneto because they are not fully trusting of him. Nor should I think they really should be, because Magneto only cares about himself, really, and what benefits him. So I think that is my answer.
All right. Well, insofar as this live is concerned, I think that kind of draws it to a close. I can't thank the three of you enough for coming on this panel and doing this live and having this discussion with me. I want to say thank you to everybody who tuned in and is either viewed this live and stuck with us or hopped in partway through, and to anybody out there who's watching this down the road, when there are so many things that have happened that we don't even know is going to happen. It's like a time travel thing. But once again, thank you, Michelle, Dylan, Steph. Thank you. Thank you to all the viewers.